let's take a look at how to test and to deliver secure mobile applications. And before we're going to dive into that, let me first take a look at the agenda. For people who never met me, I'm going to give you a short introduction about myself, but then we're going to look into some numbers. We're basically here also with, I think, a few people from the finance world, and we all love to talk also about numbers, at least money, I think. So also let's take a look at those numbers. Then I also want to look into something that I see a lot happening with mobile apps, that it needs to be very easy to use, and how will that work also with security. And then we will also dive into some topics, because the security might bring some new features to those apps that you need to test. So how can you test those? And I will also explain them during the demo. And in the end, we also have a Q&A. So if you already have questions, please put them in the question box. And hopefully we'll also have some time at the end to look into those questions. But like I already mentioned, let's first talk about me. My name is Wim Sillis. I'm a senior solutions architect at Sauce Labs, started in 2018, but before that, I was a test consultant, started in 2007, live in the Netherlands. I really love mobile. That's also one of the reasons why I'm here today. I also love open source because I learned a lot from the open source community. It basically brought me to the position that I have now also within Sauce Labs. And it also, I'm a JavaScript enthusiast. So everything you see from me, all the examples that I'm giving, is based on JavaScript, but hopefully the examples will also be clear enough for you to understand and to translate them to your favorite language. But also, if we go back to open source, that was also one of the reasons why I joined Sauce Labs, because open source is kind of like in our blood. We breathe open source, we rely on open source. And it's also one of the things that I really love to do and love to contribute back to open source. And for people who want to contribute to open source, don't worry, it doesn't always mean that you need to code. Sharing your knowledge is, in my opinion, also something about open source, sharing the passion. If you want to know more about me, what I do also in the open source community, and you can find that also on GitHub, you can find me also on LinkedIn or on Twitter. And I also love to share a fun fact. Not a lot of people know that I really love symphonic and doom metal, especially bands like Epica from the Netherlands or Draconian from, I think they're from Finland. If you never heard of them and you love some noisy music, heavy music, please watch them or check them out on Spotify, or check them out on YouTube or something. But enough about me. Let's talk about numbers, because I think that's the most important part here. If we talk about numbers, if we talk also about the financial world, and if we talk about mobile, I think it's very good to understand and see what is happening currently in the market. And if you would now look at, for example, the internet connection, if you would look into the numbers, how people are using it, that basically 92.6%, almost 93% of all users are accessing the internet through a mobile device. So not only through their desktop, no, people even prefer their mobile devices over their desktop. And it is also something, there's kind of like a nice spot there for the financial world. How can they also make some money out of that? And we will dive into that later on. I will give you an example how I am using my financial apps to make it easier for myself to do something on the internet. If we also look at the rest of the numbers, you would also see there's a huge increase between 2016 and already now, February 2021, about the amount of applications that are being downloaded. So more and more people spend time on their mobile phone. And I'm not only talking about games, there are more apps that people are using besides games. You would also see that more and more people are spending money through their mobile phone. And to spend money, you need to basically select something, buy something, and use a financial app. And that's also what we're going to look into in a few minutes. And then we would also see that more and more people spend more and more time on their phone. And I'm an iPhone lover. I don't know how this works on Android, but I get a weekly report about how my usage is on my phone. And it's quite nice to see when I'm really busy, kind of like it drops. And when I have vacation, it kind of like goes up again. Or when I'm traveling, I also watch a lot on my phone, it goes up again. It's really nice to understand your own behavior. And this is also nice to keep in the back of your mind, because that behavior can be used maybe from data you have from your customers. Hopefully you're collecting certain data about device models, about which screen sizes, which OS versions that could be used when you're testing and developing your application. But there's more if we're talking about numbers. If you would go a little bit more into the finance, into the banking world, you would see that there's an increase of 200% of people that are registering through a mobile phone. They're using their banking app through a mobile phone. And you would even see that there's also an increase on the compound annual growth rate for those financial applications. And also the market size it's growing, it's enormously. There are a lot of new features that are being added to those applications, new services also for the end users of those applications that will bring in more money. More money, it's always nice, because yeah, I see a CEO or basically the investors maybe of the company would always like to see some more profit. And if you would then also look into, this is what we can do, we can kind of like earn a lot of money. But if you would then ask the end users of those applications, what is really, really important for you, then most of the people are mentioning security. Security is really important, especially when I'm using my mobile phone. We will dive into that also in a few minutes, but let's get back to those numbers. You might now also wonder why. Why are you showing me those numbers? It has nothing to do with testing. Well, not yet. On the other hand, it has everything to do with testing. Like I already mentioned, I want to show you something that I use, basically my buying flow, when I want to buy a new product on the internet. For example, if I need to buy a new iPad, let's walk through that flow. There are a few steps that I used to get me the latest iPad. I use an application in the Netherlands, which is called bol.com. You can compare it with Amazon, not that big as Amazon, but really, really big also in the Netherlands. And the first step I did was I just selected an iPad Air. When I selected the iPad Air, I did the checkout of the iPad in the application. And then there was a connection with my banking app. And from the banking app, I just used Face ID, didn't do anything else. And a day later, I had the iPad at home and I could play with it. This was really nice. And it was even 3 steps. And the paying step was even the easiest one. The only thing I needed to do, basically have enough balance on my account, but the only thing I needed to do to make this process, basically to buy the product, was just smile into my phone. I needed to smile and then I was able to pay. How easy is that? And that is what people want. They want functionality that's really easy to use. They don't want to press a lot of buttons. Just smile and buy the product. I think that's really easy and awesome. But it also brings me to my next point, because like I mentioned, that easiness is really important. So the ease of use is something we need to keep in the back of our mind, but we also need to think about security. It's not only, for example, the buying process that needs to be easy, or the buying process that needs to be secure. Also, when I'm going to use my credit card, or if I'm going to use my banking account. What also needs to be easy and secure is when I want to install that application, the banking application, for example, on my mobile phone. I don't want to think about what was my username, what was my password, because I really have a lot of usernames. I really have a lot of passwords. I don't remember them all. That process needs to be as easy as possible, but also as secure as possible. So how do you combine that? How do you get that easy and secure process? And again, it doesn't matter which process, basically make sure that everything is secure. How can we do that? Well, it all started in 2013, where Apple started with they introduced their iPhone 5S with a fingerprint sensor. And for all kind of like how do you say, the nerdies around us, they might say it was not Apple. In 2011, it was Motorola coming with something that had biometric support already. But this was kind of like the big launch where more and more companies were going to use this, more mobile phone companies were going to use this. The reason why Apple also created this, and this is really nice to know, is they saw based on their users that only 50% of the users had a passcode on their phone. And imagine this, your complete life is on your phone. All your friends, Facebook, Instagram, everything, banking applications, everything is on your mobile phone, and 50% did not have a passcode, did not set a passcode, which is kind of strange. So this was also a reason for them to create a feature like fingerprint to make sure that people, if they found the iPhone or if they found your phone, they prevent unauthorized access. It will also help you with logging in much faster. I don't need to put in a 4-digit or a 6-digit passcode. Just put in my fingerprint and I should be able to log in. And also, this was kind of like the focus for Apple itself. They make purchases in iTunes easier. But the advantage was also that purchases for other applications would become easier and easier. It also paved the way for more types of biometrics. We had fingerprint for Android, Touch ID for iOS, but we also got facial recognition. We also have iris recognition now on those phones. It's basically really useful for us to now do the things we need to do in a secure way on our mobile phone. But I want to get back to this. I want to get back to my application, the buying process, basically only needing to smile. And I want to now think about testing this. How can you test this? And especially, how do you test this when you have a device in the cloud, where you don't have the option, for example, to put in your face? How can you use that? Well, before we can even do that, we need to install the application. So what I did for you is I built an application specifically for this session today that would mimic the flow that most of the banking applications that I've seen from all over the world are using for their registration. And if you would look at that, you would see some things that could be useful also for you when you need to test, or maybe also when you need to test specific features of that application. So let's take a look at that application. And that application has a registration flow that consists out of the first screen telling you, hey, welcome to the application. This is the first time that you're using it, or are you basically migrating from an old phone to a new phone? In my case, I say, yes, let's just migrate something from my old phone to this new phone. I just bought an iPhone 13, for example. And that process also needs to be secure and easy, because that's what our end users want. They want a feature to easily migrate data from one phone to the other phone, and especially the financial data. It needs to be secure. Can we do that? Yes, we can. A few companies use, for example, the camera. They scan, for example, a QR code, and that QR code can be a temporary QR code with security data in it, transferring it from one phone to the other phone, and basically setting up the complete registration flow in one camera snapshot. And yes, we're going to look also into QR, because QR, you might think about security. I've seen it, or I've never seen QR. I will look into that later on. After that, this is also what you see a lot in those applications, is that people need to confirm with the passcode that they had on their previous phone. So they're really sure that if you migrate from one phone to the other phone, that this is secure, yes or no. And when you've then confirmed, you did it, you confirmed your registration, you need to sign in, and then this application will give you an overview of your 2 payment accounts and 1 saving account. This is the application that we're going to use also during this session, where we're going to look into how to use biometrics, but also, like I mentioned, I wanted to get back to QR codes, how we're going to use to create a image for the test cases. First of all, like I mentioned, QR codes. QR codes are there since 1994, basically quick response codes. And it's basically, like you can already see there, it's a small image, a square with some kind of like blocks in it. I hope nobody's drawing that. It's just kind of like digitally created. It can take up to 4,000 characters of information, from links to complete data objects. and it's used by a lot of companies. You can already see here. But I think most important thing here is that it avoids the button pushing, and also it avoids long financial exchanges. We also see a lot of QR codes being used to transfer money from account A to B, not typing using all the buttons to type in the account number, the name. This is used a lot. So you might also see this in your application or your daily process if you want to buy something or need to transfer money. There's only one security concern, there are some security concerns with QR codes, especially the QR codes that you would find everywhere on the street. Don't always scan every QR code because you could get some malicious software on your phone. But when you're using it from different applications, or especially from your banking applications, then hopefully, hopefully I can assure you that it will be secure. Getting back also to that flow, now we need to enable biometrics in our application. And we can do that by going to the settings in the application. There you would see the option for Face ID. You can enable Face ID, and when you then sign out and log in again, you would get a notification, for example, like this, where the application asks you, do you want, or do you give permission to use facial ID? Just accept it, and then you can use it to log in. And then Face ID can be used for every process in that application that initially might need a username, password, or maybe even the passcode. So this is the flow that we're going to look into. And also, especially, how can SaaS Labs help you if you have those situations? So what we're going to do in a few minutes is we're going to look into live testing. How can you, for example, use camera injection in your automation process, first in the manual process, then in the automation process. I'm going to use a QR code basically to transfer an account from device A to device B, but you can also think about situations where you need to use camera injection to scan checks, or where you need to scan documents because people want to start a new account and you need to have a document for that, your passport or a different ID that you're going to use for it. Camera injection can help you with that. And basically what it will do, it simulates taking a picture through your mobile application so you can go from step A to C instead of using B, or maybe even be blocked. This is something you can use in the real device cloud, and we will dive into that in a few minutes. The second thing that we're going to use, and that also what you can find in this application, is the biometric authentication. And this biometric authentication will help you, give you access to test certain flows that are dependent on biometric support. Like logging in. I know there are some companies out there in the world that do not allow you to install or use an application if you don't have biometric support. If you don't have it, you cannot use the application, because biometrics is for them the best security layer for using your application and transferring secure data. Keep in the back of your mind for manual testing and also for automated testing that we're not testing camera or the biometrics itself. No, it's a feature that can help you to go from process A, from screen A to C, without also maybe using screen B, or maybe you would be even blocked when you cannot create an image, yes or no. So let's take a look at that, and let's take a look at the part for manual testing. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you two screens. On the left, we're going to use the iPhone and an Apple device, and on the right, we're going to use an Android device. If you're going to start using SaaS Labs for the real device cloud, and especially when you need to use it for camera and biometrics, then we would also advise you to go to the live testing part, as you can see here on the left, and then go to the mobile app. And if you would click on the mobile app, you can already see here that I've got a few applications installed. Basically, what you need to do is you can upload your application by clicking on App Upload, drag your application to this box, or maybe even click on Choose File, and then the application will be uploaded. As I mentioned, on the left, I'm going to use an iPhone, and on the right, I'm going to use an Android device. So let me already go to the settings of the device on both screens so I can explain you what we're going to need to adjust. when we want to use biometrics and camera injection. As you can see here on the left, you would see all the options for instrumenting the application for iOS, and on the right, you would see all the options for instrumenting your Android application. For using image injection and also for using biometrics, you need to enable these two flags. On the left, you have enabled. On the right, you also have enabled for biometrics. We need to do the same also for the Android one. Make sure that image injection is enabled and also make sure that the biometrics interception is enabled. If that is enabled for your application, then SaaS Labs will help you do the testing for manual, but also for automated. And we will cover that part later on. Let's now first choose a device, and let us just use this Samsung device. And on the left, I need to go for an iOS device. So let me choose an iOS device, and let me choose, for example, this iPhone 12. Now, let's hope that the demo gods really love me. It's a live demo, so hopefully everything works as expected. I'm 99.99% for sure that it will work. As you can see here on the left, we already have the banking app on the iPhone installed. And for our process, like I mentioned, what we need to do is we need to say, do we want to register based on an existing device, or do we want to register it based on a new account we want to set up? In this case, we want to use an existing account. We want to transfer something from a device through a QR code to this device. So let's click on the yes button. And as you can already see here, you will get a notification for manual testing that we need to allow our camera to be used by this application. So let me do that for iOS, and let's click on OK. And we would now already see here that we have a screen where we should use our camera. Let me also do that for the Android device. Let me go to that screen, and we would also have that camera screen. What we now need to do is we now manually need to provide an image, in our case, a QR code to the device. And this process can be done by clicking here on the device options. And in the device options, you would have an extra option, camera injection and biometrics authentication. We will cover this one later on, but we will first start using camera injection. So let's click on camera injection, and then we get a new question. Please select an image, upload it. We just select an image, and I want to use this scan registered device. This is a QR code. It has some data in it. And when I upload this one, it will be basically parsed by the application. It will retrieve the needed information. And when it is successful, it will then go to the next screen. So if I would now press open, this will happen in only 2-3 seconds. We would now see the screen that holds the data from that scanned QR code. Let's also do the same for the Android device. Click on the device options, click on camera injection. From camera injection, select also the image that we want to use. Also open this one. The data will be used by the application. As you can see here, we've got an account name, we've got a card number, and the name of the account holder was Mr. Sasma. Let's now click on yes. On the iPhone, submit a passcode. That should be the confirmation passcode, and also try to sign in again. And we now registered our application. You now had the option, and let's also do this for the Android one. You now had the option with camera injection to basically register your application, parse some data also to your application, and we could now use it for testing. We're now basically bypassing a very long or maybe complicated registration flow. And again, this is not something that I've been like setting up for you now. No, this is a process that we see with more and more financial applications that need to be basically registered on phones, or where data needs to be transferred from phone A to phone B. But like I already mentioned, sometimes you also need to use biometric interception, or biometric, where you want to test with Touch ID, Face ID, fingerprints. How can you do that? Well, when you've enabled this in the settings, in the project settings for live testing, then the only thing you need to do is log into your application, go to the screen where you need to enable the biometrics. And in this case, we can find it also in the settings. So let's get my mouse back on the screen. We go to settings. We go here to the option Face ID, and let me just close this one. And now I'm able to enable it. And the advantage of this is that Sauce Labs already set up a Face ID or a Touch ID or a iris scan or a fingerprint on the device. You do not need to use your face or fingerprint or iris or whatsoever. We already set this up for you. We can also recognize now that the application, or basically the phone, has it enabled. You don't need to go back to the settings. It is already there. We now just enabled it, meaning the application can use it. And the only thing we now need to do is go back to the settings. We need to sign out. And you would now already see that our login screen, which we previously only could use with our passcode, can now also use Face ID for iOS. And you can now also see the button here, the Face ID button, which was not on the numpad, on the keypad before. If you want to use this for iOS, again, go to the device options and now use the biometric authentication. And then the only thing you need to do is enable it, for example, with the pass, so you can log in, or provide the fail option for manual testing and it will stop. Let's just provide the pass, and hopefully I can now successfully log in. And yes, I'm logged in without using the passcode. So hopefully if you have an application that's using biometrics, you could use this also by enabling it in your application. That's always a step you need to do, because that's a flow we cannot influence. It's something that your application needs to enable. And when you enable, then in your application, then you can use it on your phone. We're now going to do it also for Android. Click on sign out. We have this screen, sign in with fingerprint. Again, provide the biometric authentication. Click on pass, and I should be able to log in now without using the passcode. So this is how Sauce Labs can already help you using the scanner for manual testing, the camera, and using also biometrics support for your application. Let's stop these sessions and let's also get back to the presentation, because just a summary of the manual testing, what you need to do if you're going to upload your application for the first time, or if your application supports biometrics or a camera, go to the settings of your application. For Android, make sure that image injection or biometrics and interception is enabled, and basically also the same for iOS. Again, make sure that image injection is enabled and biometrics interception is enabled. Then you can use this during live testing. So now that we've seen how to use this through live testing, how we can set up our secure application with camera injection and biometrics, and maybe even use this in a payment flow that I've shown you before. Now let's also take a look how we can use this during automated testing, because you also have an option to automate this flow. You don't need to do any complex things. We just need to add a few things in our script and in our capabilities. So let's start with that. Let's take a look at the demo for automated testing. Let me show you a new screen here. What you see here, and like I already mentioned at the beginning, I'm a JavaScript fan. So what you will see here is JavaScript. It's an object for setting up the capabilities. I will also share this repository with the test cases with you at the end of this session. And there you can also find what you need to add in the script and also in your capabilities to make this work. I try to make this as easy as possible by dividing also the capabilities into the default capabilities you need to provide, like your platform name, the device name, the automation name, also the app and how to upload the application. And also, for example, if you want to provide some specific SaaS options. And the last one, and these are basically the three most important options. For Android, you need to provide the allow Touch ID and roll to true. That's a capability that needs to be in your capabilities. If you set it to true, then you can use it during automated testing by using a specific function, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And Sauce Labs image injection enabled to true. That's the feature or the capability you need to use if you want to use image injection during your automation process. There's also something extra that I would always advise you to add, especially in this case, because when your app is going to use the camera or the biometrics, you can get notifications like, do you give permission to enable this, yes or no? For Android, this is already enabled for live testing. I would always advise you to provide this capability for Android, meaning auto grant permissions to true. Then Appium will automatically grant those permissions. You don't need to script it. This will make your life much easier. You won't get those complex scripts. You can do the same for iOS. Basically, also provide the allow touch ID enroll to true for using it for biometrics. Sauce Labs image injection to true for using the camera injection. And for iOS, it's not auto grant permissions, but the capability from Appium is auto accept alerts. And this is also a capability from Appium itself. The other two are from Sauce Labs, but this one is from Appium. And this will basically accept the alerts that you would get during the automation, or basically during your manual testing. It will automatically accept those alerts. Now that we've set up the capabilities, we now need to also create a script. And that's also something that I've already done for you. We've got an Android specification script, and I've also created an iOS script. Like I mentioned, you can check it out afterwards, but there are two big things, or two things you need to add to your script. If we first going to look into the QR code, how can you provide that image to the scanner, to your camera? Then you need to do two things. The first thing is that you need to provide a base 64 string of the image itself. I've already provided the basic image in this repository. With JavaScript, I'm now reading the current working directory. I'm searching for the image, and with the read file sync method, I'm going to translate it to a base 64 string. So the QR code image variable here can now be used by this specific command, a driver.execute script. It has the option sauce inject -image, and then after it, you will provide the base 64 image. That's the only thing you need to add in your script to basically provision the camera with the image that you want. It's pretty easy, hopefully. And I think there will also be some alternatives for the read file sync for different languages. Basically, just read files from your file system. But if you have already a base 64 string as a mock file or something, you can just provide it, and you would only need to have one line of code to provide data to the camera. The second part, if we want to use the biometrics, we need to do two things. The two things are a little bit harder. And the first thing is we need to wait. That's always the thing that I would advise people to do. We first need to wait for the biometrics model to be there before we're going to inject the code for accepting or basically declining or rejecting the biometrics one. To make it a little bit more stable, I would advise you to wait, for example, for the text signing with fingerprint, or maybe even signing with Face ID. Those are the two options that we provide for Android. It will now basically wait based on an XPath for a screen that has that text. And then the only thing we need to do, this is the easy part, is we need to execute a script. In this case, it needs to be biometrics sauce biometrics authenticate, and we just provide the string true or false. False means we reject it, true we mean it's a successful response. That's it for Android. For iOS, if we would look at the image recognition, image injection, also create a variable to read the file, provide it in a base 64 string with the command sauce inject image, and then the base 64 string. This is 100% the same for iOS and for Android. So there's no difference between them for image injection. When we're talking about biometrics, then there is a small difference. Let me scroll a little bit down. For biometrics, for iOS, we need to use a different way of waiting, or a different selector for waiting for the screen, for the biometric screen to be there. That's the only difference you have between using biometrics for Android and for iOS. you need to wait for a different element with different data in it. That's the only thing. For the rest, the command to submit successful or to reject biometrics needs to be done with this command: a driver execute with SaaS biometrics, authenticate, and provide true to accept it or false to reject it. Enough about the code. Let's just see how it works. Let's just run it on SaaS Labs by running this command. This is also explained in the documentation. The applications will also be provided in this repository, so you can just run this also on your local machine. Just make sure you have a SaaS Labs account and you have real devices in the cloud that you can use. And let us now go back to testing. We need to go to automated, which is here on the left. Let me make this one a little bit bigger. Then we need to go to test results. And in the test results, you would now see under real devices that there's a test running, my banking app for iOS. Let's open this one, and we should now already see that the automation process is busy. And in a few seconds, I'm already done because I used the biometrics here in 3, 2, 1. Smile, please. Log in. Do it. Is this now the live one? Is this now the demo gods that are not helping me? Did it work? No, it did not work. No, what did I do wrong? Well, I got a working example here. Let's just make sure that we're here. Yes. You also have the video here. And in that video, let's get back just a few seconds. We signed out here in the video. We waited. And in the end, we're here in this screen where we are now logged in with a very easy way. Just to summarize what we were doing also with the automated testing, we need to make sure that we provide the correct capabilities. For Android, there's only one difference in comparison to iOS, which is the auto-grant permissions. For the rest, allow, Touch ID, Enroll, and SaaS Labs image injection should be the same for both, as you can already see here. For image injection, the code for sending it is equal for iOS and for Android. And when we look at the biometrics, the only thing that differs between using it in automated testing for Android and for iOS is basically the selector, where we need to wait for the model to appear before we can also inject the code to accept biometrics, yes or no. Like I also mentioned, I wanted to share this with you. I created a repository. This link can be used. You will get the slides afterwards also with the link, and then you can use this also in your project. So hopefully you've now seen how you can use secure ways of logging in or secure ways of setting up your application, and how SaaS Labs can help you go from point A to Z and also test that specific secure flow, making sure that when your customer is using it, it will work in production. So if we have any questions, then let's start with those.
And we do have a few questions and just a few minutes left, so I will jump right in for you. To start off, question here, is it possible to set up rooted or jailbroken devices to test security features?
Very good question. Yes, you can, but not on SaaS Labs. On SaaS Labs, we only have the official devices, not jailbroken, not rooted. We only have basically the devices that you as an end user would also buy in the shops. So yes, you could do it. You need to do it yourself. But in SaaS Labs, you would only have the official devices for testing.
Great. And another question here, is it possible to route network traffic on the device through a proxy, for example, for mock server tests?
Yes, that's also possible. The best thing to do there is you could use, for example, our solution, which is called SaaS Connect. SaaS Connect is also a proxy, and you could then use, for example, Charles proxy to listen to the traffic, or use whatever proxy you have to basically mimic or transfer the data that you need to have, or to mock the data that you need to have in your application.
Great, yeah, and we can share more information on SaaS Connect for anyone interested following this. Justin is asking, is Apple Pay enabled on iOS devices?
Good question. Is it enabled? Yes and no. And the reason why I'm saying yes and no is that if you want to test Apple Pay, you need to set up your device in a few ways. First of all, if you want to test Apple Pay, you need to have cards added to your account. You need to have an iCloud account also to test it, at least within the sandbox environment of Apple. Then you also need to add a passcode to the device, then add those sandbox accounts, and then you're able to test it on the devices. The advice that we normally give for this is, if you also want to use this for automated testing, we've got two types of clouds, is to use a specific type of cloud where your setup, your Apple Pay setup, will never be removed, because we can basically allow list all the settings. If you want to know more about that, then please get in contact with us. Then we can explain you the differences between the two types of clouds we have. Because if you want to automate this process also, it's better not to set this up every time on whatever device you have, but basically assign a specific device to test Apple Pay.
Excellent. And I've got one last question for you, Wim, that came in earlier in the event today. I want to get back to this question from Cheryl. She says that Sauce Labs has a demo code to test mobile apps. Would this also work for testing live chats through a mobile device? And can it integrate with SpecFlow?
Good question. I'm not 100% sure what she means with the chats. Basically, you could test whatever you want with Sauce Labs, and as long as SpecFlow allows you to interact, for example, with Appium or to interact with Selenium, then you're able to run this also on the Sauce Labs cloud. If your automation framework uses a specific protocol, then Sauce Labs can also help you. There's a specific feature which is called virtual USB, and we can provide some more information afterwards. But that can help basically to run every framework you might know of connected to an assigned device in the Sauce Labs cloud. So there are tons of options to make this work.